So, a moment of indulgence. I get to do that now and then. I have a friend who does a lot of pulpit supply preaching up in New England, and he posted on Facebook a while back this little photo montage of all the pulpits that he preached in. And beautiful, old New England pulpits, walnut and oak, polished, gorgeous, and they were always taken, from down front looking up at the pulpit. And I thought, that's really cool, except that's not how I see it. And so now I've taken to taking pictures of the pulpits the way I see them. So if you all kindly smile. Because this is truly, thank you. As a minister, as a preacher, that's how we see it. And I thought that was kind of different. So I'm going to make a collage of all the pulpits that I preached at. It's really good to be home. It always is. So, so I think I have to explain a little bit about the title of this sermon, which you can probably guess. And it came to me when I was engaged in the rituals of my morning routine. I was brushing my teeth and shaving, taking a shower, washing my hair. I like to think of these as rituals, but it kind of is overstating the case. It's really just kind of habit, completed nearly automatically while my mind wanders into the day ahead. My brain was focused on this one morning on this topic of character that you all have been exploring this month. I was told I need to preach on character, so I'm trying to come up with an idea. And so I'm thinking, and I thought, well, what is character? And it said, to me, it sort of became that character might be a summation of a bunch of practices and habits that make us good people. I thought, practices, habits, okay, that sounds good. But then I wondered what I could offer into that conversation about character that maybe might illuminate some of the practices that help form our character. And so I reached for the shampoo, and I had an epiphany. Lather, rinse, repeat. The fact is, we engage in these sort of practices every day that form our character, but like my habit of showering every morning, those practices are often done pretty mindlessly. And so this is what I thought I would preach about. Mindful practice. Spiritual practice. Yeah, that's it. It's a good idea. Except, well, to be honest, I have to admit I kind of struggle with spiritual practices and mindfulness. I do believe it's important, even critical to my wholeness as a human being. You see, I believe that love is possible and present in every moment of our lives, and that we often fail to see it. We fail to experience it. And spiritual practice, I believe, has the potential to open us up to that experience of love. So I think the difficulty I have is just that there's a lot of different spiritual practices that people use. A lot I've read about, more than I care to count. Many of them I've tried. And I struggle with them, and I give up a lot. And I beat myself up for quitting quite a lot. So while I was thinking I could share with you today a whole host of ideas about how different spiritual practices can form your character, I have decided that there is really only one practice that will form your character. And I hold out the possibility, I always do, that I could be wrong. I could be. But for now, I'm going to assert that there is really only one practice that forms our character. But first, I want to wrestle with this term a little bit, character. Because for me, this term, character, is one of those kind of elusive and fuzzy ideas. We sometimes talk about character as some sort of quality that people have. She has good character, something they possess. But when we really push on it a little bit, it seems we have a difficult time actually discerning what we mean by that. that idea, good character. It's kind of squishy. This character counts project that's common in our schools, it breaks down character in a rubric of 6 traits: trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, citizenship. Those sound good. All these are worthy of our attention, worthy of our understanding, and more particularly worthy of training on how we might embody those traits. And I suppose that if we gathered the best sense of those 6 traits together, we would, into one person, we'd say they had great character. And I'm thinking that maybe we can broadly define the term character to mean who we are being in the world, right? It's just who we are being in the world. And someone with good character is then a person whose presence in the world is imbued with the types of socially acceptable, socially progressive traits that we prefer. And then someone of poor character would then be someone whose presence in the world lacks those traits. I wonder how many of you like that definition. I find most definitions of character to be really unsatisfying. They tend to be dry and clinical, dull, really meaningless. Trying to define the term deadens it for me. It leaves me with a sense that character is not really something I want to deal with. It doesn't mean much. But the truth is, I do think it matters. I think our character matters. But what is most important about character is not how we define it. It's how we form it and how it forms us. You know, I was reading through the material, the Soul Matters materials, and I really resonated with this quote from Helen, I get the middle name wrong, Douglas. Ms. Douglas writes, character isn't inherited. One builds it daily by the way the one thinks and acts, taught by thought, thought by thought, action by action. If one lets fear or hate or anger take possession of the mind, they become self-forged chains. So character is a practice. It's a habit, a way of forming ourselves into the kind of people we aspire to be, or perhaps the kind of people we just inherently are. To this, I would add one note that character formation is not about information. It's about making space in our lives, about expanding the circles around us to let in more people, more relationships. And that idea that it's about formation, not information, is really bad news for me. Because I'd really prefer to just take the class, right? Read the book or 2, maybe watch a good TED video in which I could be taught all the information I would need to have good character, and that would be it. But it really doesn't work this way. It doesn't. I've learned that we cannot think our way into character, so I always return to this question of how we do this. How do we form our character? And what practice can we cultivate that will ultimately be formational? So I make this bold claim. One I kind of hinted at earlier. My claim is this, that love, in whatever way you name that or in whatever way you experience it, love is always possible and therefore is always present. Perhaps then character is our capacity to notice love. And if so, character formation is an act of shaping that capacity to notice, of expanding our capacity to notice love. It is to be present in our everyday lives enough first to notice what we are experiencing and then to dig into that noticing until we find our capacity for love expanding. And spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle points to a challenge in this practice of noticing. He notes that the moment you think you know something is the moment you've lost the connection. That we stop observing when we have named what we see and presume then we know all about it. So when we see a winged creature and call it a bird, we stop looking at the winged creature and start presuming the qualities of a bird. We use its name and the assumptions we have of that. As a result, we disconnect from the reality of the creature before us. So, if we're to develop a practice of noticing such that we can expand our capacity to love, we must not stop the observation. We must not let ourselves solely live in our assumptions and judgments, but continue to observe, continue to look deeply. So I'll tell you a story of something I noticed. Last week, I was eating breakfast at a cafe along Michigan Avenue overlooking Grant Park in Chicago. It was a very balmy 18 degrees out that morning. And I was sipping coffee and sort of absent-mindedly staring at the traffic and the pedestrians, vaguely looking into the park. And then I noticed this van that pulled up on the sidewalk across the street. And I watched, a man got out of the van, went around to the side, got a bucket, and walked over to a bus shelter. And I realized that I had not noticed the shelter until he'd walked up to it. But it was right across the street. So this man quickly sets to working, and he's cleaning the shelter. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. It's 18 degrees out in Chicago. And he starts cleaning the bus shelter. And with deft strokes of his squeegee, he started on the inside surface of the glass, and he started moving in this practice rhythm that became really fascinating to watch. But let me guide you through the train of thought I had as I watched him do his work. So first, I was surprised that they would clean the bus stop shelters at all. Not that the shelters don't need cleaning, but I was surprised that any municipality with budget issues, right, would be spending money to do so. And then I became intensely aware that I was in the part of town that was frequented by tourists. And that may have something to do with making sure those bus stops were clean along Grant Park and Michigan Avenue. And I wondered how often the bus shelters in Woodlawn or back of the yards were cleaned. Places tourists rarely go. And in my mind, I thought, yeah, they never get cleaned out there. Another great slight to those cities' residents. My attention then turned back to the man washing the enclosure, and I thought, what a crappy job. And then I thought, geez, Greg, what makes you think that's a crappy job? Okay, so it's 18 degrees out and 7 o'clock in the morning, and this man, bundled against the cold, is driving along Michigan Avenue, washing bus stops, and that seems like work I would not want to do. But why does that make it a crappy job? So then I focused more on this man as his wrist snapped as he swung the squeegee across the glass, and I wondered how one gets such a job. I wonder if this is what he thought he would be doing when he was younger. I wondered if he thought it was a crappy job. I wondered if he liked the job. You know, perhaps the work paid pretty decently, enough to keep his family warm and safe, I thought. And then I thought about his family. I wondered if he had kids. Kids whom he loved so much that he would gladly wash bus stops in freezing weather so that his family would be safe and warm. And now I'm angry with myself and my stupid, privileged life, making assumptions and judgments about this man that I don't know. And I'm thinking of his family. And now I'm watching him more closely, and I saw how practiced he was, how carefully he was working while moving quickly. You know, I noticed there was a couple people that were now in that shelter, and I wonder if they even saw the man standing behind them, cleaning the shelter for them. And I began to think about this man's parents. And I imagined them struggling, as all parents do, to try and raise their children as best they can. I'm betting they loved him. I'm hoping they loved him. Because now he's washing the last pane of glass, he's almost done, and I'm hoping his family loves him. because now I am most certainly sure I do. He finishes the job and walks back to the van. And traffic sort of obscures my vision of him for a moment, and when it clears, he's disappeared, and I'm looking for him. The van's still there, but he's not. And then suddenly I see him, and he's standing near the street waiting for the traffic to clear. And when it does, he steps into the middle of Michigan Avenue, raises a camera, and takes a picture of the bus stop that he's just cleaned. Now, I can confess, perhaps the photo was part of his job, right? He had to prove that he cleaned this bus stop number, whatever it was. Required proof that the work has been done. Maybe. But even if it was, today I choose to believe that the photo wasn't only a perfunctory duty, it was an act of pride. A clear choice to document work well done, work that pretty much no one else would notice. Staring through the glass across 6 lanes of busy Michigan Avenue traffic, I whispered, I noticed. So it is this practice of noticing that I believe is the one practice that will actually form our character. It enlarges our capacity to love. It enlarges our experience of love. It is the practice that I invite you to cultivate. Now, I'll warn you. In this practice of noticing, there will be times when it is not comfortable. I invite you to hold on through that discomfort, to develop the practice of being productively uncomfortable. You see, often when we find ourselves uncomfortable, we try to escape that discomfort. We douse our feelings, we divert our attention. We'll do nearly anything to escape our discomfort. And I think that's a fairly natural response, but informing our capacity to experience love, running away is just not going to get us anywhere. And I confess, and you heard it in the story, watching the man clean the bus stop brought up lots of discomfort for me. In those few moments, I had to confront the absurdness of my judgments, the deep-seated bias of my privilege. Watching this man do his work, I had to confront the truth that I experience my life as normal, and the systems in which I live support that idea. So then any work that I don't particularly want to do must be a crappy job, right? And in that bubble of my privilege, I presumed that this man must only be doing this work because it's all he could find, not because he likes it, not because he's good at it, not because it is good and useful work. And in that moment, as I'm having all of those thoughts, I am terribly uncomfortable. And the easiest thing for me to have done was to turn away. I could just look the other way, sip my coffee, and it all goes away. But I didn't. I stayed with him. I stayed with him so that I could wrestle the demons of my own blindness. I stayed in the discomfort of my thoughts, and in doing so, I was able to see this man in his work as inherently worthy, inherently dignified, and deeply interconnected to my own life. My discomfort became productive because when he stepped into the street to take a photo of his work well done, I could feel my capacity for love expanding. So I invite you in the coming days to develop your own practice of noticing. Find at least one thing each day that you notice. And when those noticings lead you down uncomfortable paths, let those thoughts lead you to a productive discomfort, one that will help you expand your capacity to see love in every moment of your life. And then I invite you to share that, to share what you notice. If you're on social media, you'll notice the reading listed in the order of service as a hashtag, Today I Noticed. I invite you to use it. I have several friends that do. Today I noticed. Or as you sit down to share a meal with your family, a partner, your friends, begin by saying one thing that you noticed today. It need not be profound. It can be simple, but just one thing. And ask your friends each day to tell you one thing that they've noticed. Keep with this practice, and I assert your capacity for love will grow. Your capacity for compassion, for caring, for trust, for justice will enlarge. You will form your character from the deepest yearnings of your heart. Today I noticed. I received a full night's rest, the first time in ages. Today I noticed the lake was frozen. Today I noticed a stormy sky. Today I noticed the care people took to welcome us as visitors. Today I noticed. Amen. Let us sing together.